Good Friday morning of the 30th week. I'm going to read the gospel here, okay? It's very different than anything we have chatted about in the first part of this week. See, but on the Sabbath, that's a key thing here. He's going to distinguish between the spirit of the law and the law itself. See, the difference between obedience to law and response to the spirit of the law. He obviously favors the spirit of the law. Watch what he does here. Boy, I think of the church of the 50s. I'll get to it. On a Sabbath, Jesus went to dine at the home of one of the leading Pharisees. And the people there were observing him carefully. Why? Because the Pharisees are known for being law keepers. They restored the law. They're the good guys. The New Testament doesn't do them justice on that score. But they are also literalists. They take the law literally. They were reformers. They tried to restore the law. Hence, they were fierce in every detail of the law. Now watch what he does. In front of him, there was a man suffering from dropsy. Now, Jesus spoke to the scholars of the law and the Pharisees in reply asking, is it lawful to cure on the Sabbath or not? Can you work on the Sabbath? Remember, you're forbidden to work on the Sabbath. They kept silent. So he took the man, and after he had healed him, he dismissed him. Then he said to them, who among you, if your son or ox falls into a cistern, would not immediately pull him out on the Sabbath day? But they are unable to answer this question. Okay? The moral order normally follows the law, but may transcend the law, not by going against it, but going beyond it. Okay? I think of, I don't know how else to put it. One of the most important lessons I had to learn in my life, and I owe the passionists this so much, is how to embrace the spirit of the law rather than servile obedience to the canon law of the church. Servile. Those of us, I don't know how old you are who are listening to this thing or watching it, but if you grew up in the 50s, at least on the East Coast, I didn't find that stress here in the West, Midwest, but on the East Coast, at least the corridor from Boston to Washington, there was a strict Jansenism, a strict legalism. Some call it Irish Jansenism. Maybe that's right. I don't know. What I was a literalist, very scrupulous type of ethic that we were raised with, and it was fiercely legalistic. Very, very, very much so. And it constituted almost everything and anything. I'll give you an example when it was I used this before because it was so telling an example that we worshipped a God who was a lawgiver and a lawmaker and a God executor, a law executor. You get out of line, you're going to hell. Remember, we threw around mortal sins like they were candy bars. You have to know that how many mortal sins. When we went to confession, we went with a lineup of mortal sins. Remember, mortal sin is a sin that should you die in it, you go to hell for eternity. And we had it from everything from coming a minute or two late in the liturgy of the Mass. You could come in if you were late, but you couldn't be too late. If you were too late, it was a mortal sin. If you come in a little bit before that, it's a venial sin. So you get purgatory instead of hell. Think about that. And we were taught that from the time we first communion. It was 7, 8 years old. My God. I told you this story. I told you that story so many times. And it certainly followed. Yeah, I'll show it to you, okay? We were all in on it. That is, nobody was imposing themselves on somebody else. It was the culture. And I remember we were in Sunday school. I told this story with my brother and Al and a bunch of guys, and I was screwing around. I was having a good time. I was fooling around. The good Sister Ann, I think her name was. What a marvelous woman. But she saw Pete. She thought my brother was the one goofing off, and we were goofing off while we were saying the Our Father. I've never forgotten that because I always think of when I'm saying the Our Father, don't fool around. Anyway, I was horsing around during the Our Father, and she mistook Pete for me. So she thought Pete was fooling around. So she, you're lucky if God doesn't strike you dead. That's horrible. Here we are about 9 or 10 years old. God's going to strike you dead for having fun during the Our Father. I said, it wasn't him, it wasn't him, it was me, it was me. That's a religion of terror. And there was so many other things like it. You could eat up to 2 ounces of meat on a Friday, up to 2 ounces. You go over 2, you're going to hell forever. Think about it. It isn't some trivial matter. It was the entire culture we lived in. And no wonder our lines were long going to confession on Saturdays. Even in my time as a priest, in the first 10 years, I guess you could say, when I'd be helping out in a parish, maybe the first 2 or 3 years, from 69 to the early 70s, there could be 20, 30 people waiting to go to confession. Now you don't get 20 a month, okay? 10 a month. We're in a better time, I think. It's got its own issues, very much so, because we're losing our moral voice. But that wasn't a moral voice. That was a legal voice. And we lived in the age of terror, moral terror, because of rule keeping and breaking of the rules. Yeah. You want to know the truth? You see, I would have been a Pharisee in those days, and I would have been all over Christ like a wetsuit for curing the guy on the Sabbath. I would have been. I would have been. I was as much a moralistic, what's the word I want? Person. That's not the right word. I was just a legalist. That's what I wanted to say. It took the order to transform me. It took its early years. It had to break me out of my confessors, especially Simon Wood. Simon saved me from myself. That's the truth. Our men not only preached Jesus crucified, they preached an authentic Christ, a Christ who came to save us, not to put us in hell. And I learned how to become a moral person, not a legalistic person, but a moral person. I remember one of the priests, there's certain one-liners that I never forgot, that we go into the confessional to lift men's burdens, not to add to them. To lift men's burdens, people's burdens. I know that when I hear confessions, whether it's informally or by schedule, I'm just a typical passionist. I'm not there to condemn you. I'm there to lift your burdens. Not only by the forgiveness of sin, but by moral counseling. In some cases, to say that's just not a serious sin. It's okay. You're just human. You're not going to go to hell for being human. So that they're not only free of the sin, such as it is, but they're free of the fear of God condemning them just for being human. Christ doesn't condemn his apostles. I love St. Peter. His sandals are in his mouth 9 out of 10 times. He's perfect. No wonder Christ picked him. We will call him a stumble bum, but a beautiful one. When I look at the apostles, I think, hell's bells. And considering who Christ could have picked, even among the genius of the Pharisees, but he picks a bunch of working stiffs. They changed the world because they believed in Christ. But he had to kick them in the butt once in a while, too, especially St. Peter, the rock upon which the church is built. Peter got it wrong so many times, but he learned. Yeah, and then he died upside down, remember? He wasn't worthy to be crucified the way Christ was. He gets crucified upside down. I'm so grateful for my passionist vocation. They transform my heart and my conscience so that I'm a minister that brings peace and not one who brings condemnation. We preach a crucified Christ, and we preach him in order to lift men's burdens, not to add to them, to bring freedom and not enslavement, hope and not dread. That's the truth. That's the truth.